My hands shook as I stared at the email on my laptop screen. The subject line read, "Congratulations on your promotion," but it wasn't addressed to me. It was addressed to Emma Chen, my former best friend, who just landed the creative director position at the agency I had been courting for 6 months. The same agency where I had submitted an identical portfolio 3 weeks ago. But that's not what made my blood run cold. It was the attached photo from Emma's celebration dinner. Emma sat at the head of a table surrounded by my former colleagues, wearing my signature vintage Chanel blazer, my red lipstick, even my asymmetrical bob haircut. She was holding up a champagne flute with my distinctive silver ring on her finger, the one I'd lost at a networking event last month. Emma wasn't just celebrating my stolen job. She was celebrating it while wearing my stolen identity. My apartment felt suffocating as the realization crashed over me. This wasn't coincidence. This wasn't parallel thinking. This was systematic identity theft executed with surgical precision, and Emma had been doing it for 2 years. The story began 3 years ago when I met Emma at a networking event for young professionals. Emma had seemed lost, overwhelmed by the crowd of confident creatives and entrepreneurs. She wore an ill-fitting black dress that hung awkwardly on her thin frame and kept checking her phone with the desperate frequency of someone drowning in social anxiety. I, naturally empathetic and successful enough to be generous, approached her. "First time at one of these?" I asked, offering Emma a glass of wine from a passing server. Emma's face lit up with such intense gratitude that it made me uncomfortable. "Is it that obvious? I just moved here from Ohio. Everything feels so intimidating. Everyone seems so perfect." The way Emma said perfect while staring at me should have been a warning sign. But I was riding high on a recent promotion and felt magnanimous. I took Emma under my wing that night, introducing her to contacts, explaining industry dynamics, even inviting her to join my carefully curated friend group. Emma was like a starving person at a feast, absorbing every detail of my life with what seemed like admiration and genuine friendship. But it was more than that. Emma studied me with the intensity of a scientist examining a specimen. "You're so confident," Emma would say during our coffee dates, her eyes never leaving my face. "I wish I could be more like you. How do you do it? How do you make everything look so effortless?" I found Emma's vulnerability endearing and her curiosity flattering. I shared my secrets freely, my morning routine that kept me centered, my favorite vintage shops, my skincare regimen, even my personal philosophy about success and relationships. Emma listened with rapt attention, asking follow-up questions that seemed thoughtful but were actually reconnaissance. "What's your favorite coffee order?" Emma would ask. "I want to try new things. Which lipstick shade is that? It's so perfect on you. Where did you get that blazer? It's exactly my style." The copying started small and felt innocent. Emma began shopping at the same boutiques I mentioned, ordering the same coffee drinks, even adopting my habit of journaling in leather-bound notebooks. I felt flattered. Imitation was the sincerest form of flattery, after all. But then Emma started showing up to events wearing outfits nearly identical to ones I'd worn weeks earlier. She began using my signature phrases in conversations. "That's fascinating," delivered with my exact intonation. "I'm obsessed," said with my particular emphasis. Emma's gestures became mirror images of my mannerisms, her laugh transforming from a nervous giggle to my confident, throaty chuckle. When I started dating Marcus, a photographer I'd met at a gallery, Emma suddenly developed an intense interest in photography. She began frequenting the same art spaces, using terminology I taught her about composition and lighting. She even started wearing the same perfume I wore on dates, a custom blend I'd created at a boutique in Soho. The transformation was so gradual that I almost missed it. Emma evolved from awkward newcomer to polished professional, but she wasn't becoming herself. She was becoming me. The breaking point came 6 months ago. I'd spent weeks developing a revolutionary marketing concept for sustainable fashion brands, a passion project that combined my environmental values with my creative expertise. I'd shared my excitement with Emma during one of our regular dinners, sketching ideas on napkins and explaining my vision for changing how fashion brands communicate with conscious consumers. I'd been vulnerable that night, sharing not just my professional ideas but my deeper motivations. I talked about my grandmother's sewing circle, how watching those women create beautiful things from scraps had shaped my understanding of sustainability and creativity. I shared my fears about climate change, my guilt about working in an industry built on consumption, my hope that I could be part of the solution. Emma listened with that same intense focus, asking probing questions about my research methods, my client approach, even my pricing strategy. I mistook Emma's interrogation for genuine interest and support. 2 weeks later, Emma presented nearly identical concepts to a competing agency and landed a major client that I'd been courting for months. But it wasn't just the ideas that were stolen. Emma had appropriated my personal story too. She told the client about her grandmother's sewing circle, her environmental awakening, her vision for sustainable fashion. When I confronted her, Emma's response was devastating in its calculated innocence. "I'm so sorry, Sarah. I guess we just think alike. Great minds, right? I had no idea you were working on something similar. But I knew better. The concepts weren't just similar, they included specific terminology I'd coined, unique visual elements I described, even the same client research Emma couldn't have conducted independently. Emma had stolen not just my ideas, but my personal history, my emotional connection to the work. That night, I sat in my apartment surrounded by evidence of Emma's systematic identity theft. Photos on social media showed Emma's transformation from awkward newcomer to polished professional who looked, spoke, and even thought like me. Emma had stolen my style, my ideas, my mannerisms, my professional opportunities, and was now positioning herself as the original while making me appear to be the copycat. But the cruelest theft was yet to come. Emma started dating Marcus 3 weeks after my confrontation about the stolen concepts. She'd used inside information about his interests, information I'd shared in confidence, to orchestrate chance encounters. Emma knew Marcus loved obscure art films because I'd told her about our movie nights. She knew he collected vintage cameras because I'd mentioned his hobby. She even knew about his complicated relationship with his father because I'd shared Marcus's vulnerabilities during a moment of relationship anxiety. Within weeks, Marcus was posting photos with Emma, praising her authentic creativity and unique perspective on art. The captions made me nauseous. They were filled with insights about photography and art that Emma had learned from my conversations about Marcus's work. I realized that Emma hadn't just copied my life, she'd systematically replaced me in it. Emma had stolen my professional opportunities, my personal style, my social connections, my romantic relationship, even my family stories and emotional experiences. And now, watching Emma receive credit for concepts, achievements, and even personal growth that originated with me, I understood that this wasn't admiration or coincidence. This was psychological warfare disguised as friendship. Emma had been methodically erasing my identity and claiming it as her own. The rage that built in my chest wasn't hot and impulsive. It was cold, methodical, and absolutely focused. Emma wanted to be Sarah Martinez. She was about to learn exactly what that meant, including the parts of me that Emma never bothered to understand. My revenge began with something Emma never bothered to copy: meticulous research and strategic thinking. I spent my evenings and weekends building a comprehensive dossier on Emma's stolen life, but this wasn't just surveillance. This was forensic analysis. I created fake social media accounts to monitor Emma's activities, but I also dug deeper. I tracked Emma's professional engagements, mapped out her social connections, and most importantly, documented every single instance of theft with timestamps, screenshots, and side-by-side comparisons. What I discovered made me physically sick. Emma hadn't just copied my recent life, she'd been systematically stealing from me since the day we met. Emma had infiltrated my entire ecosystem with the precision of a parasite. She befriended my former colleagues using conversation topics I'd taught her. She joined my yoga studio and interrogated other members about my routines and preferences. She'd even started volunteering at the animal shelter where I spent my weekends, using her position to gather more personal information. But I noticed something crucial in my surveillance. Emma's execution was fundamentally flawed. She copied the surface elements without understanding the deeper principles. Emma wore the clothes but lacked my innate sense of style. Her outfits looked like costumes rather than authentic choices. She used the professional terminology but misapplied concepts she didn't truly understand, creating presentations that sounded impressive but lacked substance. She'd adopted my mannerisms, but they appeared forced, unnatural, like an actor who'd memorized lines without understanding the character. Emma was a skilled mimic, but she wasn't me. She was a hollow imitation, and that was going to be her downfall. My plan unfolded in 3 carefully orchestrated phases, each designed to exploit Emma's fundamental weakness, her complete dependence on stolen material. Phase 1 began at the monthly Creative Professionals Meetup, an industry gathering Emma now attended religiously. I arrived early, positioning myself strategically near the registration table. I was wearing a completely new look, a bold, avant-garde ensemble that represented an evolution of my style, something Emma couldn't have anticipated or copied. When Emma arrived, I watched her confusion with cold satisfaction. Emma had clearly planned her outfit to complement what she expected me to wear, based on patterns she'd observed. Instead, Emma looked like she was trying too hard to recreate something that no longer existed. I approached the microphone during the open discussion segment. "I'd like to talk about authenticity in creative work," I began, my voice carrying clearly through the room. "Recently, I've been thinking about the difference between inspiration and appropriation. How do we distinguish between being influenced by others and simply copying their work?" I presented a case study, a hypothetical scenario that mirrored exactly what Emma had done, but framed as an academic discussion. I described how someone might systematically copy another person's ideas, style, and professional approach, then position themselves as the original creator. "The fascinating thing about this type of appropriation," I continued, making direct eye contact with Emma, "is that it often reveals itself through small inconsistencies. The copycat might use terminology incorrectly or apply concepts in ways that show they don't understand the underlying principles. They become so focused on mimicking the surface that they miss the substance entirely." Emma shifted uncomfortably in her seat, her face flushing. Several people in the audience nodded thoughtfully, and I noticed a few glances directed toward Emma. The seed of doubt had been planted, but I wasn't finished. "I've actually been documenting a case of professional identity theft," I continued, my voice taking on a sharper edge. "It's remarkable how systematic it can be. The perpetrator doesn't just steal ideas, they steal personal stories, emotional experiences, even family histories. They create an entire false identity built on someone else's life." The room had gone completely quiet. Emma looked like she might be sick. After the presentation, I mingled strategically. I approached people I knew Emma had been cultivating, engaging them in conversations that subtly highlighted discrepancies in Emma's claimed expertise. "It's interesting how Emma described sustainable fashion metrics last week," I mentioned to David, a potential client Emma had been courting. Some of her interpretations were quite unique, almost like she was working from incomplete information. David frowned. "Now that you mention it, there were some gaps in her knowledge that seemed odd for someone who claims to specialize in that area. And that story about her grandmother's sewing circle felt rehearsed." Phase 2 escalated over the following weeks. I began systematically dismantling Emma's stolen network by revealing the truth to key people. But I didn't do it through accusations or confrontations. Instead, I demonstrated Emma's lack of authentic knowledge through carefully orchestrated conversations. I invited Marcus to coffee, not with accusations about Emma, but with genuine interest in his photography work. I shared insights about art and creativity that revealed the depth of knowledge Emma had been mimicking without understanding. "You know," Marcus said during one of our meetings, "Emma mentioned some of these same concepts, but hearing you explain them, I realized she might have been oversimplifying. Or maybe she didn't really understand what she was talking about." I nodded sympathetically. Sometimes people repeat things they've heard without fully grasping the nuances. It's not necessarily intentional, but it can be misleading. But then I showed Marcus the documentation I'd been compiling, side-by-side photos of Emma wearing identical outfits weeks after me, screenshots of Emma using my exact phrases in professional posts, even video evidence of Emma adopting my gestures and speech patterns. Marcus stared at the evidence in horror. This is insane. She's been copying everything about you. Even things she told me about her childhood. These are your stories, aren't they? My grandmother's sewing circle, yes. My environmental awakening, my fears about climate change, my guilt about working in fashion, all of it. She's been using my personal experiences to build emotional connections with people. Marcus looked nauseated. She used those same stories with me. About her grandmother, about her values. I thought I was connecting with her authentic self, but it was all stolen from you. The revelation destroyed Marcus's relationship with Emma, but more importantly, it created an ally in my campaign. Marcus began sharing his own observations about Emma's inconsistencies with our mutual friends, adding credibility to my growing case. Meanwhile, I reached out to Rebecca, a prominent industry blogger known for her investigative pieces on professional ethics. I provided her with carefully curated evidence, ensuring that the narrative focused on the broader implications of identity theft in creative industries. This isn't just about personal grievances, I told Rebecca. This is about protecting intellectual property and authentic creative expression. If we don't address this kind of systematic appropriation, we're essentially rewarding theft and punishing originality. Rebecca was intrigued. As a journalist, she recognized both a compelling story and an important issue. I provided her with comprehensive documentation, not just the copying, but the systematic nature of it, the psychological manipulation involved, and the broader implications for creative professionals. Phase 3 began when Rebecca published her explosive article, The Psychology of Professional Identity Theft, a case study in creative appropriation. The piece didn't name Emma directly, but the details were so specific that anyone familiar with our industry recognized the situation immediately. The article went viral within our professional community, sparking intense discussions about ethics, originality, and the fine line between inspiration and theft. But Rebecca had done more than just expose Emma's behavior. She provided a framework for understanding and identifying this type of systematic appropriation. Emma panicked. She called me at 2 a.m., her voice shaking with barely controlled rage and desperation. I know this article is about me. How could you do this? You're trying to destroy my life. My response was measured, almost clinical. Emma, I think you're being paranoid. The article discusses general patterns of behavior. If you see yourself in it, maybe that's something you should reflect on. Don't play games with me. You know exactly what you've done. What I've done, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper, is protect myself and other creative professionals from systematic theft. If that threatens your career, perhaps you should examine why. I never stole anything from you. We just have similar tastes. I laughed, the sound sharp and cutting. Emma, I have 2 years of documentation showing you copying every aspect of my life. My clothes, my ideas, my mannerisms, my personal stories, even my family history. You've built your entire identity on stolen material. That's not true. Would you like me to send you the evidence? Side-by-side photos, video comparisons, screenshots of you using my exact phrases? Or maybe you'd prefer I share the recording of you telling Marcus about your grandmother's sewing circle, the same story I told you about my grandmother. The silence on the other end of the line was deafening. You recorded me? Emma's voice was barely a whisper. I documented everything, Emma. Every theft, every lie, every manipulation. You wanted to be me so badly that you forgot I'm actually intelligent enough to notice. The conversation ended with Emma hanging up, but I knew the real confrontation was yet to come. It happened at the annual Creative Excellence Awards, an event both of us were attending. Emma arrived wearing a stunning red dress, one that I recognized as nearly identical to a vintage piece I'd worn to a gallery opening 6 months earlier. But this time, Emma's copying worked against her. I'd anticipated this. I was wearing something completely different, a bold, architectural black ensemble that represented my evolved aesthetic. When photographers captured both of us at the event, the contrast was stark and deliberate. Emma looked like she was trying to recreate something from the past, while I appeared innovative and forward-thinking. During the networking portion of the evening, I orchestrated the final phase of my revenge. I'd arranged for several key industry figures to be present, including the client Emma stole from me, Marcus, who was attending as a photographer for the event, and Rebecca, who was covering the awards for her publication. I approached Emma at the bar, my demeanor friendly but my eyes cold with purpose. Emma, you look lovely tonight. That dress is so familiar. It reminds me of something I wore a while back. Emma's face flushed, but she tried to maintain composure. I don't know what you mean. Of course not. Just like you didn't know your sustainable fashion concepts were identical to mine. Just like you didn't know you were using my exact phrases in your presentations. Just like you didn't know you were systematically copying every aspect of my professional and personal style. The conversation was happening in a semi-private corner, but I'd positioned us where key people could overhear. Marcus was nearby, adjusting his camera equipment. The stolen client was at a table within earshot. Rebecca was close enough to witness the exchange, her journalist instincts activated. Emma's composure finally cracked. You think you own everything. You think no one else can have similar ideas or wear similar clothes. Similar. My voice remained calm, but my words cut deep. Emma, you've spent 2 years systematically copying every detail of my life. My style, my ideas, my mannerisms, my relationships, my personal history, even my family stories. You haven't had an original thought since we met. That's not true. I pulled out my phone, opening the comprehensive documentation I had been maintaining. Would you like to see the evidence? 2 years of side-by-side photos showing you wearing identical outfits weeks after me. Screenshots of you using my exact terminology in posts. Video evidence of you adopting my gestures and speech patterns. Audio recordings of you telling my personal stories as if they were your own experiences. Emma lunged for the phone, but I stepped back smoothly. The movement caught the attention of nearby guests, including Marcus, who instinctively raised his camera. The fascinating thing, I continued, my voice carrying to the growing audience, is that you've never understood what you were copying. You took the surface elements without grasping the underlying principles. You're like someone who memorizes a song in a foreign language. You can repeat the sounds, but you don't understand the meaning. Emma's face was now red with humiliation and rage. You're just jealous that I've been more successful. Successful? I laughed, the sound sharp and devastating. Emma, you haven't been successful. You've been a tribute act, a cover band. You've built your entire professional identity on stolen material, and now everyone can see it. The crowd had grown larger, drawn by the tension. I noticed the stolen client watching with fascination, his expression shifting from confusion to understanding. Marcus had lowered his camera, his face showing disgust as he recognized the woman he'd briefly dated. Rebecca was taking notes, her journalistic instincts fully engaged. You want to be me so badly, I said, my voice dropping to a whisper that somehow carried in the sudden quiet. But here's what you never understood. Being me isn't about the clothes or the phrases or the mannerisms. It's about the intelligence, the creativity, the authentic vision that creates those things. And that's something you can never copy, because it's something you don't possess. Emma's response was a strangled sob of rage and humiliation. But instead of fleeing, she made one final, desperate attempt to salvage the situation. She's lying, Emma shouted to the crowd. She's obsessed with me. She can't stand that I'm more successful than she is. But I was ready for this too. I opened my phone and began playing a recording, Emma's voice clearly audible as she told Marcus about her grandmother's sewing circle, using my exact words, my emotional inflections, even my specific details about the women in the circle and their individual personalities. The crowd listened in stunned silence as Emma's voice continued, sharing her environmental awakening, her fears about climate change, her guilt about working in fashion, all in my words, with my emotional nuances, told as Emma's personal experiences. When the recording ended, the silence was deafening. Emma looked around at the faces staring at her, some shocked, some disgusted, all now understanding the depth of her deception. That's my grandmother, I said quietly. Those are my memories, my emotions, my personal experiences. And you've been using them to build relationships and advance your career. Emma's final facade crumbled completely. She turned and fled the event, leaving behind a room full of witnesses who had just seen the careful construction of her stolen identity collapse in real time. The aftermath unfolded with devastating precision. Within hours, videos of the confrontation were circulating through industry social media channels. The audio recording of Emma, using my personal stories, became a case study in professional ethics courses. Emma's carefully constructed identity didn't just crumble, it imploded spectacularly. The stolen client, having witnessed the confrontation and heard the evidence, terminated their contract with Emma's agency the next morning. They didn't just return to me, they brought 3 additional clients who were disturbed by the implications of working with someone who builds their professional identity on stolen material. Emma's social media presence, once carefully curated to mirror my aesthetic, became a liability overnight. People began posting side-by-side comparisons with timestamps, creating a viral thread that documented 2 years of systematic copying. The hashtag identity theft trended in our professional circles, with Emma becoming an unwitting case study in creative appropriation. But the personal consequences were even more devastating. Marcus published a blog post about his experience dating Emma, describing how she used stolen personal stories to build emotional intimacy. His post went viral, with other people sharing their own experiences of being manipulated by individuals who appropriate others' personal histories for their own gain. Emma attempted damage control, posting a lengthy social media statement about unconscious influence and parallel thinking. But the evidence I'd compiled was too comprehensive, too systematic to be explained away as coincidence. Emma's statement only drew more attention to her copying, with industry professionals dissecting every claim and finding it wanting. The yoga studio, where Emma had been attending my former classes, asked her to leave after other members complained about her invasive questions about my routines and personal life. The animal shelter where Emma volunteered discovered she'd been using her position to gather information about my personal relationships and asked her to step down immediately. Even Emma's apartment became a problem. I learned through mutual acquaintances that Emma had been gradually redecorating to match my aesthetic, using photos from my social media as a guide. When Emma's landlord visited for an inspection, he was disturbed by the apartment's resemblance to another tenant he'd seen featured in a magazine article about young professionals, a feature that had showcased my home. But perhaps the most devastating consequence was professional. Emma's agency, facing scrutiny about their hiring practices and ethical standards, conducted an internal investigation. They discovered that Emma's portfolio contained numerous concepts that could be traced back to my work, including the sustainable fashion campaign that launched Emma's career. The agency terminated Emma's employment and issued a public statement about their commitment to original creative work and ethical business practices. Emma's professional reputation was destroyed not just in our city, but throughout the industry network. 3 months after the awards ceremony confrontation, Emma left the city. She posted a vague message about new opportunities and fresh starts, but I knew the truth. Emma's stolen identity had become unsustainable. The professional community was too small, the evidence too overwhelming, the humiliation too complete. I received a final message from Emma, a long, rambling email that alternated between apology and accusation. Emma claimed she never meant to hurt anyone, that she was just trying to find herself, that my reaction was disproportionate and cruel. But buried in the defensive text was a confession that validated everything I suspected. I just wanted to be successful like you. I thought if I could figure out your formula, I could have what you had. I never meant for it to go so far. I just wanted to be someone people admired, someone people wanted to be around. I didn't know how to be that person on my own. I deleted the email without responding. Emma's confession was unnecessary. The results spoke for themselves. 6 months later, I stood in my new corner office, but everything had changed. The awards on my walls had multiplied, including recognition for my work on intellectual property rights in creative industries. My client roster had expanded beyond my previous achievements, filled with companies that value authentic creativity and ethical business practices. The industry recognition I'd gained extended far beyond my creative work. I'd become a thought leader on professional ethics and authentic creative expression. Speaking engagements and consulting opportunities flowed from my expertise in identifying and preventing creative appropriation. I'd even been approached about writing a book on protecting intellectual property in creative fields. Marcus had become more than a rekindled romance. He was a true partner who appreciated my genuine complexity rather than a surface imitation. Our relationship was built on mutual respect and authentic connection, everything my friendship with Emma never was. But perhaps most importantly, I reclaimed my sense of self. The experience with Emma forced me to examine what made me unique, to articulate the principles and values that couldn't be copied. I'd emerged stronger, more self-aware, and more protective of my intellectual and creative property. My revenge wasn't just about destroying Emma's stolen identity, it was about reclaiming my own authenticity in a world full of imitations. I didn't just expose a copycat, I demonstrated the irreplaceable value of genuine creativity and personal integrity. The final irony wasn't lost on me. Emma wanted to be me so desperately that she destroyed any chance of becoming someone worthwhile in her own right. In trying to steal my identity, Emma lost her own completely and proved that authenticity cannot be replicated, only earned. I picked up my phone and scrolled through my social media, noting the authentic engagement from people who appreciated my genuine voice and original perspective. No one was copying me anymore, not because they couldn't, but because they'd learned the consequences of trying. I set the phone down and returned to my work, creating something new, something original, something that belonged entirely to me. In the end, that was the most satisfying revenge of all, being irreplaceably, authentically myself while Emma remained lost in the shadow of who she tried to become. The morning sun caught the awards on my wall, each one bearing my name in elegant gold lettering. But now I knew that the real victory wasn't in the accolades or the recognition. It was in the knowledge that everything I'd built was genuinely mine, earned through authentic effort and original thought. Emma wanted to steal my life, but she only succeeded in proving that some things can never be taken: integrity, authenticity, and the quiet confidence that comes from knowing exactly who you are.